So welcome friends, welcome everyone back to our Funding Fridays webinar series. I'm very excited about our presentation today, and I believe many of you are too, because as I had mentioned before, if you're just joining it, this is the highest registration rate that we've had for any of our webinars. 250 of your colleagues have expressed interest in finding out about arts and humanities funding. So hopefully and also this is just the starting point. I was actually talking with Lisa and Sheila about this tomorrow. I mean, this is just sort of dipping our toes in and figuring out what's out there, and hopefully we'll have some follow-up webinars, maybe with some of your colleagues about what, the types of grants and awards that your colleagues have had. But as I said, so today we're going to learn about funding opportunities in the arts and humanities. And this webinar series represents a welcome collaboration between the Office of Research, which I represent, and I always forget to introduce myself. I am Effie McLaughlin. I am the Interim Assistant University Dean for Research. I've been working in the Office of Research for 10 years or so now, and I administer all the internal funding programs and also the research development activities, of which this is one of them. So this is a collaboration between the Office of Research, the Research Foundation Office of Award Pre-Proposal Support, which also provides some resources for faculty who are applying for funding opportunities, such as a peer review service of grant applications. And I believe they have done humanities funding applications before too. And then also the CUNY Office of Library Services, which has been a great resource for us. And we've done a bunch of professional development webinars involving the Office of Library Services, including our last Funding Friday webinar, which is on the website and the calendar, which is Boosting Your Scholarly Profile Online, which is going to be presented next month as our Funding Fridays webinar with Megan Wacha from the Office of Library Services. So the goal of this webinar series is to create a living resource for research development support and information for researchers in all capacities and levels across the university. The webinars are being recorded and made available on the Office of Research website. So the webinars will be recorded, and then also any other materials that are provided in the webinar will be available on our website, including the Zoom chat, which might have additional resources and handouts and presentations and things like that. So it'll all be up there. So I am amazed to find out that we are nearing the end of our Funding Friday season. We've been doing this since September or August, actually August? No, so it's September. And so we're lining up. We have a few webinars queued up for our next season. I've been doing this on an academic year basis. So it'll be starting up again in August or September. I also, please do stay tuned for those of you who are interested in public interest technology and sort of technology and social justice issues and access to technology. We do run a public interest technology challenge grant, which is in collaboration with New America. We're part of the Public Interest Technology University Consortium. I can throw up the link for that, but I think we're going to be trying to do a bonus Funding Friday in a couple of weeks, where we're going to talk about the Challenge Grant and Public Interest Technology Initiative. So we're also going to have some events over the summer, some more intensive sort of hands-on grant writing workshops. We have one lined up for grant writing for NIH grants with Michelle Keeley, who is the research dean or the associate dean for research in the School of Public Health. So we're going to be doing that. So we'll keep you updated of that, and we'll be notifying people through all our normal avenues and resources and networks and listservs. So please stay tuned for those. And also, again, I encourage you to get in touch with me if you have any ideas for upcoming research or for upcoming webinar topics. And I know that a number of you have reached out to me about additional topics in sort of humanities and arts funding. So if you have any ideas about how we could construct good webinars around that, that would be great. Again, please, this is being recorded. So if you're not comfortable being recorded, please keep your cameras off. And just a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is going to run for about 45 minutes. I'm going to try to stop talking. The presentation itself is going to run for about 45 minutes, and then we try to leave at least 15 minutes at the end for question and answer from you. And we find for large groups like this, it's easier if you just type all your questions in the chat, and Remy Dar, my colleague, and I will be monitoring the chat. And we will make every effort to go back. So if you have any question at any point through the presentation, please type it in the chat, and we'll go back and look at them and try to capture all your questions. And also we will be recording the chat. So if there's anything that for whatever reason we weren't able to get to, we can try to answer that and forward that to you. With that, allow me to introduce our speakers today. I'm not going to do a long-winded sort of, academic introduction. I'm just going to say who they are, and if they want to provide a little bit more information about themselves and their role, that's great. So Lisa Rhodey is the Deputy Director of Digital Initiatives and the Director of the Digital Humanities Research Institute and the Director of the Digital Fellowship Programs at the CUNY Graduate Center. And she's been a wonderful resource for me in the Office of Research when I've been looking for humanities funding, and I knew that she would be the perfect person to help us within the CUNY community to help us talk about this topic. And Sheila Brennan is a Senior Program Officer in the Office of Digital Humanities at the National Endowment for the Humanities. And both of these wonderful scholars have their own websites, which I linked to in the promotion materials for this. So you can also see more about their scholarship and their creative works there too. So please, Sheila and Lisa, take it away if you want to share your screen. Oh, do you want to talk about the poll first, or do you want to just go into the presentation?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Evie.
Sure.
Thanks so much for that intro, and for you and Lisa inviting me to join you all today. Lisa, I will talk about the poll, but did you have anything you wanted to say as a matter of introduction before I start to dig in?
Sure, maybe I could just say sort of the shape of our presentation today. We're going to spend the beginning sort of talking about the NEH and the various programs that are available through NEH. We also are going to talk about some programs that are available through more localized organizations like Humanities New York, a recent grant opportunity through the Mellon Foundation, a couple other national grant programs that I think folks at CUNY are specifically interested in. We have some tips and tricks for writing proposals, some guidelines, and some resources to wrap things up before we go to questions and answers and things like that, which I think we're going to begin by hosting in the chat. So I'll turn things back over to Sheila so she can get us started.
All right, excellent. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining us today. Effie put together just a quick poll. It's something I usually start off a lot of presentations, just getting a sense of who in the audience has had any kind of relationship with the National Endowment for the Humanities, or for any federal funders like our sister organizations such as the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or even the NSF, the National Historic Records and Preservation Council, NHPRC, the name that I always tend to butcher, but we'll get to that later. And so I do see that some of you with us have applied for funding in the past. Fewer than that, so about 24% have. Only 12% of you have ever served as a peer reviewer, so I hope to turn that percentage around by the end of this conversation. And then I do see that, about 30% of you, or 35% of you think that you've ever used or enjoyed any NEH-funded resources, public programs, collections, or summer institutes. I'm sure even more of you have seen an NEH supported documentary or been to an exhibition that has had some of that as well. All right,
Sheila, I just ended the poll so everyone can see the results for a little bit.
Oh, great. Okay.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks. All right. So I'm gonna move on. So I'm gonna take that out of my screen sharing and move on to our second slide. I just want to confirm that we can see the next slide on the National Endowment for the Humanities. So for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with the NEH, it was founded in 1965 when President Lyndon Johnson signed the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities Act that created both the National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Endowment for the Arts as separate independent agencies. And one thing that's really great about this Cold War era piece of legislation is that it explicitly states and affirms that the encouragement and support of scholarship in the humanities, and also support for the arts, although I'm not going to talk so much about that today, but that these are all appropriate matters of concern to the federal government. So it really affirms that there is a place, it's not the only place, but there is a strong place for public funding, taxpayer money, to support and fund humanities scholarship activities, teaching and learning, and public programming. And, you know, I think that this legislation, of course, remains relevant today. I think many of us probably on the call do. And one of the components of that piece of legislation also describes how democracy demands wisdom and the vision in its citizens. And it must therefore foster and support a form of education and access to the arts and humanities designed to make people of all backgrounds and wherever located masters of their technology and not its unthinking servants. So with that, I'm going to kind of move along into a quick review of how to go about finding opportunities. Where are and what kinds of grants does the NEH offer at any given time? Well, if you go to NEH.gov/grants, there are a number of different resources there that will not only allow you to find the right grant program by clicking on match your project to a grant program, sort of one way of doing that. But another option is to also browse through the list of grant opportunities, take a dip into what the different divisions fund, as well as clicking on and looking at the funded projects database, which includes every grant ever funded by the NEH since its start. And the link that I've provided to you on these slides, and we will make sure that Effie gets a copy, a PDF of these slides with all of the links, and we'll share to everyone who's registered today. So you will get these links as well. But you can dig in and see what kinds of projects have been funded recently, especially because perhaps there is someone in your department, or in your college that has recently won an award. And, that might be a point of contact for you to get in touch with, to just have, share a cup of coffee over Zoom or hopefully in a public park or somewhere else, in the coming weeks. To just talk about the process, and maybe they'd even be willing to share some tips or share their application with you. But I would encourage you to start there, to also think about how your community of CUNY staff and faculty, how you can contribute to that, but also to foster that around the kind of work that you would like to do and sort of funding opportunities that you're interested in. So the way that the NEH is structured is on the program side, or on the grant making side. We are divided into different divisions, and these different programs support research, teaching and learning, public programs, preservation, and experimental or innovative digital humanities, but also across all areas of humanities, subject areas, and topics and methodologies. So I'm just going to take a minute or two to offer a real brief description of each division. And then I'm going to provide just one example of a project. And I've tried to highlight projects that come from CUNY, come from across CUNY, because we do get quite a lot of applications from across the university system. All right, so the Office of Digital Humanities, which is where I work, which of course I think is the best and coolest division in all of the NEH. I always have to say that, especially when I'm the only program officer on a panel. So anyway, the Office of Digital Humanities, or ODH as we call it, offers programs that fund project teams. So these go to organizations. So it would go to your CUNY college or unit. So we fund teams that are experimenting with digital technologies to develop new methods and approaches to humanities research, teaching and learning, public engagement, and scholarly communications and publishing, as well as supporting professional development opportunities in digital humanities methods and practices. So we have two primary programs, and one is the Digital Humanities Advancement Grants, and that's the one that funds the experimenting with digital technologies and methods at different stages. So from sort of level 1 planning through level 2s, which are sort of a slightly more mature advanced ideas and projects, to level 3, which is sort of our big money, which isn't big money compared to, say, the NSF, but it's the stage where you've got a mature digital project with a large audience, or maybe not a large audience, but a real confirmed base of users with an eye towards scaling up and long-term sustainability. Now, I did want to highlight, because Lisa is with us today, a project that she has directed for 2 different iterations through the Institute for Advanced Topics in Digital Humanities. It is the Digital Humanities Research Institutes. So through the Graduate Center, she and the graduate fellows and some visiting faculty have been working over the last few years to not only advance research goals and the professional growth of individual participants, but also to really increase their capacity to then become a trainer and become a digital humanities expert in their own university or their own small college or their own nonprofit. And so over, the Institute has sort of changed from its first iteration to what Lisa and the team is trying to iterate for this summer. But like a lot of our institutes, they can be residential. So theirs has been a 10-day residential institute for exploring interdisciplinary DH research and teaching. And one of the things that I love about the DHRI and some of our other institutes for advanced topics are the resources that are created as a result of developing these workshops, and then that are published openly on the web, usually with a Creative Commons license. They might be available on a project website or available in an institutional repository, but they become these shareable, usable DH curricula that has a life and extends their usefulness, well beyond those who participate in the institute. All right. I'm going to move over to the Division of Education Programs, and they support humanities education by supporting curricular development as well as professional development opportunities for K-12 educators and higher education faculty. So their major programs are the seminars and institutes, which are also intense summer institutes for faculty and K-12 educators. They have a program called Humanities Connections, which is about planning and implementing curriculum development that is interdisciplinary. So humanities, taking faculty from humanities departments and have them working across colleges and universities. So it could be a digital humanities minor for undergraduates, or it could be a medical humanities, environmental humanities, that bridge the sciences, or that bridge engineering and computer science and different humanities fields. So there's some really exciting work that's been coming out of the Humanities Connections programs. And there also is this other program called Humanities Initiatives. And this has changed recently and has become quite capacious and invites applications from all kinds of institutions, and in fact has different priorities for HBCUs, for Hispanic serving institutions, for tribal colleges and universities, as well as community colleges. And one of CUNY's community colleges, Manhattan Community College, recently earned a Humanities Initiative Award to develop a 3-year curriculum that will create interdisciplinary course modules and curriculum materials examining poverty. And they're planning workshops for faculty teaching across the college that will result in the enhancement of at least 100 courses, which I've got to say, when I was reading about that, that just blew my mind. That's like a remarkable amount of work and effort that's represented there, and such a benefit to all of Manhattan Community College's students. The team is also going to launch a website for this initiative, and they're developing student-centered digital humanities projects. And one of the projects that they're going to host on this website is a mapping project called Mapping Poverty. So really, really impressive. Now, the Division of Preservation and Access focuses on ensuring the long-term and wide-scale availability of cultural heritage resources, and often through digital means. So these grants, their grants go to libraries and archives and museums, and to universities and colleges and scholars who are working with all kinds of sources, that kind of raw material, they like to say, of building blocks of humanities research. So their major programs include the Humanities Collections and Reference Resources program, and that's the place where you go if you're looking for funding to describe collections or digitize collections, or take collections that were digitized 10 or 15 years ago and actually reprocess them and make them more accessible in a web accessible format, perhaps describing it with standard metadata, using standard metadata standards. I'm using standard too much, but you get the idea. It's about bringing and making these resources much more accessible to researchers, to students, and to their interested publics. They also offer a great program called Preservation Assistance Grants, which are small grants designed for small to medium sized institutions who are looking for to either bring in some consultants on a conservation issue, and it may be that a small team of librarians and archivists need some professional development on planning for and implementing digital infrastructure. They're looking into digitizing their collections, and they know they don't quite have all of the pieces, and they want to make sure that they're making good choices and good decisions for the long term. And those are real, can be $5,000 to $10,000, but they support taking care of these important collections, but might be at smaller institutions. The National Digital Newspaper Program, something that many of you have probably benefited from if you've ever used digitized newspapers in Chronicling America. That program supports statewide digitization programs. So that may not be of interest of anyone here in terms of being an applicant, but I'm sure you've benefited from some of that work. I know I certainly have. And they also have another program that is called the Research and Development Program, and that is really focusing on supporting projects that are kind of at the cutting edge of preservation, conservation of sources, and sort of tackling big issues. And sometimes experimenting with it, and it could be digitally, but it doesn't have to be. It can certainly be for sort of new methods of preserving and maintaining access to physical objects as well. So the example that I've highlighted today for you comes from that large program I mentioned first, the Humanities Collections and Reference Resources Program. And there was a grant to the Brooklyn College Library for the arrangement, description, and rehousing of the Hank Kaplan collection, which consists of books, photographs, newspaper clippings, audio and videotapes, as well as scrapbooks, correspondence, and other materials documenting the history of American and British prize fighting. So, the kinds of collections are vast and as diverse as our own collective histories. So that's also one of their biggest programs. So there are a lot of really great collections that get funding through HCRR. Now, the Division of Public Programs supports a wide variety of public humanities programs that reach large and diverse public audiences and make use of a variety of formats. such as a museum exhibit or a major library and archive exhibition, public programming, public conversations, documentary films, short documentaries, radio and podcasts, as well as other digital media and digital projects, sometimes born digital projects that have a very focused set of public audiences. So one recent examples from City College, which was funded through the Digital Projects for the Public program. And this is a comprehensive website that documents and presents the history of Dominican music in the United States. And so this website has all kinds of historically based narratives and guides to listening, listening and hearing different kinds of music and connections across cultural connections, starting that center music from the Dominican Republic. So I really like this, this project as well. Now, the Division of Research Programs supports scholarly research that advances knowledge and understanding of the humanities. So it sort of has a wide swath. It's it's our largest division. This is the division where individual researchers go to apply for a fellowship or for a summer stipend. It's where, the fellowships give you up to a year to focus on research and preparation towards, some kind of scholarly output. It can be a book. It doesn't have to just solely be, a print monograph. Summer stipends as well. And if you are faculty or staff working at an HBCU, an HSI, a community college, or a tribal college and university, there is another program that's called Awards for Faculty. So this is also an opportunity that I would really encourage for those of you who work at HSIs, community colleges within CUNY to really examine, because I think it's sometimes overlooked, and it's, the fellowships funding ratio is among the lowest across the endowment. Now, to be fair and honest, the funding ratios are generally low, across the NEH, but in the fellowships in particular, it's in the single digits, more like 9%. And I think the awards for faculty program, it's more like 15 or to 18%. So it's a little bit better, but it's definitely one to explore. And one of your colleagues from John Jay College, Adam McKimble, recently earned an awards for faculty to work on his latest book, which is called Jim Crow Modernism, the Saturday Evening Post and the Harlem Renaissance. And as you can see, he was featured, gave a talk, I guess now it's been a couple of years, 2019 doesn't seem like it should be that long ago, but I guess it's moving on 2 years. Such has been this crazy pandemic time. So anyway, there are a number of opportunities within the research programs, Division of Research Programs, including chances to collaborate with scholars, both in your own institution and outside of your own institution. There also is a program if you are working on a digital critical edition or, a translation of some major humanities collections. There is a program specifically for scholarly editions and translations as well. So this may be of interest more to the administrators and folks who have mature projects or perhaps institutional needs. The Office of Challenge Grants runs programs to support capital projects, also to strengthen institutional and organizational capacity for work in the humanities. And that now also includes digital infrastructure. So that's why I included this slide, which it is showing the example of the Humanities Commons, because it is a project that some of you, if you don't know about it, may be able to use and benefit from. It started at the Modern Language Association, and it is now housed at Michigan State University. And this is the kind of project that it's both a network a network of humanities scholars. Over this past year in 2020, there were conferences that took place virtually within the Humanities Commons within their groups. There also is a repository where you can if you, I'm not sure what the situation is across CUNY or the different units, but if you don't have access to a digital repository, you could put a preprint of your newest article, one that you have the ability to share widely. You could deposit that in the core repository and make it available for yourself, for students, for others. So this is a really great resource that I would encourage you all to check out. If you need a website, if you're looking to bring together a group of your colleagues on a particular topic, or to organize a special interest group within your scholarly, wherever your scholarly home is, scholarly society.
Sheila, can I jump in really quickly?
Oh, please,
yes. To do a little plug. So the Humanities Commons is actually based on, for those of you who use the CUNY Academic Commons, the infrastructure that was used and is now built on for Humanities Commons is based on the CUNY Academic Commons. So if you use that infrastructure, if you use our own homegrown version, you'll also see that it echoes and is very similar to this larger project. And it's a great example of how the work that humanists at CUNY is extending to all kinds of other scholarly and research activities across the United States.
Thanks, Lisa. It's like I buried the lead. Thank you for raising that up for us. Thanks so much. And now this is also going to be a transition point for us. One other important piece of funding that comes into the National Endowment for the Humanities goes immediately back out to the states through our federal state partnership program. So by law, 40% of any funding that is allocated to the NEH. So when you hear $137 million went to the NEH for, the American Rescue Plan, 40% of that money, or whatever that dollar amount is, will go through the federal and state, our Office of Federal and State Partnerships, back out to the states. And every state and territory has a humanities council. And it's there that those state humanities councils can fund and do fund smaller organizations. They fund regional and local humanities events and really the things that are important to the communities. So they don't have to necessarily have national significance, but they offer a place for taking, say, local history. I'm a historian, you can probably tell. Take a local history event and then help the communities make community members make connections to broader themes and broader cultural connections that perhaps they might not have seen when they celebrate the anniversary of some historic event that happened in their town or their region. So the New York Humanities Council, New York Humanities, does offer a number of grant programs, and Lisa is much more familiar with them, and so I'm going to let her take over and talk about these opportunities.
Sure, thanks, Sheila. So quickly, what I've linked to here are the grant guidelines for all of these different grant programs. And yes, you're going to receive a copy of the slides as PDFs, and they'll have all of the links. So what happens is if you review the guidelines, you'll see that there are several different programs. Sometimes these change from year to year, but I'm going to talk about some of the more consistent ones. These are usually smaller awards, and sometimes we overlook the smaller awards, because they're not as institutionally easy to work with, because we have some challenges in terms of how we go through the research foundation. But I will say that working with these smaller awards is a wonderful seed grant to getting started towards moving towards larger dollar awards. Money likes money. It's kind of like the mean girls of academia. You really, once you have a grant, other people want your grant. So I really recommend that you take a close look at these. And so many of them are designed, Sheila, if you could go to the next slide. So many of them are designed exactly for the kinds of things that CUNY faculty are just drawn to. They're community focused. They're about creating public and community facing projects. You can imagine working on these with your classes and building them. One of them is the Action Grants, and it has deadlines twice a year. This year it's October 1st and January 1st. They're designed to connect audiences to the communities where they live and work. So think about all of those community-centered projects where you're doing oral histories of your local community and you want to put them together, where you want to do a curated collection of the different street art, perhaps, that are in the neighborhoods or things like that. This is a great way to get off and running. They oftentimes think about different ways you can employ what they call humanities tools, which could mean anything from a website design to creating maps or interactive, fluid digital narratives. But this year, these past couple of years, they're really focusing on women's history projects because of the anniversary of the suffrage movement, and they're going to extend that through 2021 because of the pandemic. If we go to the next one, the Vision Grants, which are also part of Humanities New York, and I'm trying to also focus on ones that are closest to us, they support these sort of early conversations. So maybe you're not quite ready to execute, and maybe you don't have community partners yet, but you're trying to put something together so that you can reach out to communities where your college is to begin having the conversations. This is a great $1,500 award to give perhaps like little local stipends to community members to come to a meeting, to provide some preliminary sort of food or something like that, to start thinking about how you might work together. And it's designed to start putting those community-based and research projects into action. So if you go to the next slide, I'm just going to bring this up because I know for the most part, there probably aren't graduate students on the call, but I really think it's so important for faculty who work with graduate students in some capacity to encourage them to start looking at grant opportunities. And this one is perfect for them. For those of you who are advising students who are at the Graduate Center, there's a Humanities Centers initiative that works with the Whiting Foundation and the Mellon Foundation, and they offer up to $4,000 for graduate students to make publicly engaged humanities projects. It has a special kind of a grant guideline. It works specifically with the CUNY Center for the Humanities, and they get some support through the CUNY Center for the Humanities. And like I said, that $4,000, and trust me, those grad students can really use the $4,000 to do that work. It also gives them a great jumping off point. Students who have won these awards have also gone on to win recognition through the New York's Digital Humanities and to doing other kinds of projects. So if we go to the next slide, I'll send that back to you, Sheila.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Those are, it's really, it's so important to, sorry about that, to look for those starting points. I think that that is such a great point, that it also allows you to get your feet wet, starting with a smaller application. And that's always a good thing too, because you can't always just jump right in to major national funding opportunities, because they are such a big endeavor, which we'll get to in just a few minutes. I did just want to mention, very briefly, a few other places that you might explore opportunities for any librarians who might be on this call. You may be familiar with opportunities available through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So while they also provide some direct support that goes out to state library councils as well, they do quite a lot of support for museums and libraries of all sizes that also, support research and collection development. And, they have these small grants that are called sort of sparks, that might be like an interesting idea that uses library resources and materials to sort of, work with a specific audience on increasing understanding, on a particular topic. using particular sources or, helping with to make community connections. The National Historical Publications and Records Commission, that's through the National Archives, is a program that Lisa's going to talk about more specifically. Recently, really within the last couple of years, they have really widened the scope of the kinds of projects that they would fund. They've also been on the cusp of elimination a number of times. And for years, they funded primarily scholarly editing projects of historical resources. So important work, but they've also expanded, and now they're looking for not just historical papers projects, but they're looking to help digitize, describe, and make available resources that are held in community archives, or that might be held at a university archive that reflect, alumni or folks who lived there and deposited their papers, and made quite a mark on a particular group or issue. And so I'm going to let Lisa talk about that in a moment. The National Science Foundation does still have some room for social science and humanities overlapping. I'm so glad that Tamara Schneider is here because she might, if you have any questions about that, now that I'm putting you on the spot, but not for now, but just saying that there are opportunities, but it's really important that you pay attention to sort of how these directorates change, because they're very much more so than at the NEH. Individual directors do have a little more sort of input in sort of shaping where they want particular programs to go in any given sort of year or sort of grouping of years. So it's important to sort of be in touch much more closely with program officers and directorates in the National Science Foundation. I also wanted to just point out a couple of fellowship opportunities that you may not think of or be aware of, and those are at the Smithsonian at the Library of Congress. The Smithsonian Fellowships span all of their units, which would include, even they still have 2 units up in New York, but primarily it's in the DC area. And they're usually working with collections at a particular museum, but they're a fellowship like you would get an NEH fellowship, and allows you to work on what you want to work on with the materials that you would have much closer access to by being a Smithsonian Fellow. The Kluge Center at the Library of Congress also has some opportunities to work closely, also in targeted areas, and these can change as well, but also making use of the amazing collections and resources that they have available at LOC. All right, Lisa, I'm going to send it back to you to talk about archive collaboratives and some of these collaborative digital edition grants that are new to NHPRC's remit.
Sure. So NHPRC is right now, I think that the grants are open for 2 projects that I think CUNY faculty would be specifically interested in. One is an archive collaborative, and it does require that at least 3 archives or participants be included in the proposal. But the idea here is to begin connecting across resources. And the deadline is coming up pretty quick. It's June 9th. So really those folks who already are working with various collections, and I know that this is an issue in the city. We've got things like a number of small localized archives. This is also an opportunity where some creative work might happen. They've got some sort of guidelines around that. So this is one grant category. The other is the startup grants for collaborative digital edition, specifically for African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, and Native American history. And I would recommend that you go to the website and look at these details and look at the grant proposal guidelines. They're great starting grants for those folks who are thinking about developing digital editions, and maybe you're working with a collaborator, you have some resources, and you're doing some sort of restorative work within the archives. These are great opportunities for you. If we go to the next slide, This last one is also, it's a little bit outside of our purview, but at the same time, I just know that so many people work with local archives who are also faculty. And this is currently, I've got a link. This is from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. If you look up Patricia Sway on Twitter, you'll be able to find it. This is to sign up for 2 webinars that describe the program. And there's a link on the slide when you receive it that will take you to the sign up for the webinar. And these grants vary widely in size. They can go anywhere from $50,000 to $750,000. You may want, for example, if I know Brooklyn College, for example, you've got a lot of local oral history projects and you've been trying to find some resources there at Brooklyn College, this might be an opportunity. There are some other places that might be interested. We want to move.
Yeah,
yeah.
I do see that we're at the at 147. And some of the next 2 slides really are things that I'm just kind of gonna breeze through, but also you'll get in your slides. Effie, if you'd like me to stop now, that's also fine, because I do feel like these are things that we won't have a lot of time to talk through, but just
well, maybe, I mean, we could maybe have a follow-up. I mean, you know, this was sort of an informational sort of prospecting webinar, and maybe we can have a follow-up webinar next season where we talk more about specifically about writing grants for the NEH. I mean, if there's anything in particular that you think is important on these slides that you think, you know, faculty should know.
Sheila, do you want to flip through and we can show them some of the things we've put together? Yeah.
Oh, great.
The applicant resources, that's great.
Yeah, and Lisa also has a packet. So that first slide that was sort of on project development and application design that she has put together, and actually things we worked on years ago together, sort of an outgrowth we've both used as sort of project development resources, how to think through what it is you want to do, what you have, what you need funding for, how you're going to plan for it, that I think will be very useful for everyone here on the call. For NEH specifically, I just want to emphasize that we as program staff do our best to provide a number of different resources to help applicants like you. We have written, there are a number of blog posts that feature, you know, how to apply for, you know, how to write a strong application for humanities collections and reference resources, or how to apply for a digital humanities advancement grant. We all do this because we want to see stronger applications, and we're here to help. Each program has webinars, so I would encourage you to not only look at programs, read the guidelines, or what they're called notice of funding opportunities now, or NOFOs, read those and then read them multiple times, watch the webinar, determine, are you in the right program? Do you think you're in the right program? When you have a question, contact program staff. We're here. We're here to help you. But it also helps if we have something in front of us, you know, a project precis, any, you know, a one page or 2-pager that kind of outlines what it is you want to do. You know, what activities are you specifically seeking funding for? Any kind of outline that sort of describes sort of the nuts and bolts of an application helps us help you better. Some programs accept drafts. I would encourage you to take advantage of that service. It has no bearing on the final review, but most applicants do find it really helpful to strengthen their application, or for, you know, to hear that they're not quite ready, or perhaps to hear that there's another program that would better suit their needs. I also am going to make a pitch to volunteer as a peer reviewer. It is the best way to get an inside view on the application process. You get to read, you know, a dozen or more applications. You get to see what is a successful application. You also participate in a peer review conversation in a panel with, you know, 3 to 4 other invited experts, and so you get to hear what issues are, and it's a really important learning conversation. And also, each program provides examples of successful funded applications. Those are also really good places to learn and see what a successful application looks like for a particular program.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a couple questions in the chat. I did want to thank Lisa and Sheila for talking about. We did discuss this when we were having our discussion about this webinar, that it is the audience is all potential reviewers across CUNY. So I appreciate the fact that you talked about institutional grants, grad student grants, and also our colleague Elvis Bakaitis from the Graduate Center Library also appreciated the fact that you talked about grants for libraries. And I do want to point out that actually Elvis and her colleague Kate Wolf, who also works in the Grad Center Library, did a webinar last month on prospecting, grant prospecting. We asked Elvis and Kate to focus specifically on humanities funding, so resources for that, whether it be the foundation directory. So there's also, I mean, one thing that actually didn't even come up here was sort of nonprofit foundation sources for humanities and arts funding. So that's also something you can take a look at. There was one question from Chuck Burks about we could use information on creative and performing arts grants that support initiatives for creation of theater, digital entertainment, that focuses on culture, social justice, and awareness of race relations. Can you either of you speak to that, to more performing arts grants?
Well, I can say, just like there's a New York Council on the Humanities, there is also one for the arts. So I would look for the New York Foundation, I think it's New York Foundation for the Arts, for funding opportunities through them, as well as our colleagues at the National Endowments for the Arts. They do offer programs that fund performance and, you know, whether it's playwriting or, you know, interpretive arts and performance. They would be the places to go for those kinds of projects. And I apologize that this did not satisfy those of you who were on the call hoping to hear about arts funding.
Great. Brandon asked specifically, are there any sites dealing specifically with LGBTQI+ grants that you know of? Any grants specific to those communities?
Unless, you know, I don't know the one foundation. I'm not sure actually. That's a great question. I know that NEH is open, like that topic is a suitable topic for any kind of project across the NEH. Lisa, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that specifically, either local or.
I don't, other than to say that those are generally private foundation oriented, and that's, you know, that I think would be a great topic for another conversation.
Again, I encourage you to reach out to your librarians. I mean, your offices of sponsored research on your campuses are a great resource, your grants officers, but I would also very much encourage you to reach out to your libraries because they have access to resources for grant prospecting and they're very knowledgeable in that area. So that would be a good place to start, particularly for nonprofit and foundation grants. Yeah, so a webinar on creative art, performing arts, I'll put that on my list for next season. Also a grant writing webinar at NEH, sort of more hands-on grant writing workshop.
I see there's a question about how do they volunteer to become peer reviewers and how are peer reviewers selected?
Great.
Yeah, let me see, let me get this in I'll get this in a chat in a moment. So we do have a form that you can fill out if you want to volunteer to become a peer reviewer. And let me put this in the chat. And basically what you do is you submit your name and your email and you describe you provide a short biography and describe the fields in which you are, you know, where your expertise lie and the kind of projects. You can even say, I'd like to review for, you know, the fellowships program, or I would like to review for digital projects for the public because I used to work in a museum and now, you know, I'm an instructor in a museum studies program or something like that. There's also an opportunity for you to upload a CV. And those are the kinds of things that that we as program officers also, go to and look through. You can also go directly to any of these offices that I showed you at the beginning and email them directly and say, I would really like to review for, Humanities Connections programs, because you might be really interested in setting up your own, putting together your own application. So each of these divisions has a division email, and you can email them directly. So we at ODH, you can do that. We're happy to get those kinds of emails. We're always looking for more reviewers. So please sign up. Thank you for that question.
And Elvis did put in the chat that she would be happy to help any faculty figure out how to use Pivot and Grant Forward. We're actually resources that are available on the website of our other partner in this webinar series, the Research Foundation. So you should definitely check out the pre-award support resources on the Research Foundation website too. Are there any questions that I missed?
Would it be, do you want me to show some of the grant writing resources? I know we weren't able to touch on them as much, but I dropped into the chat a link to a number of slides that I use when I teach proposal development at the Graduate Center. We include it in our Digital Research Institute in the winter, and I include it in the Digital Humanities Research Institute. It's something that I've worked on previously with Sheila when we did this for IMLS. And for a number of other organizations. The proposal development slides that I dropped for you go over what the purpose of writing a grant is, thinking about how you are going to craft your audience statement, the different kinds of ethical and naming kinds of considerations that you might want to keep in mind, what you need to get started, and then it will walk you through step by step a brainstorming process. So if you were to go through each of these slides, they would lead you through a number of activities to start thinking about how to write a proposal and to think about it from end to end. So beginning with how you want the project to look when it's completely finished, and then backwards engineering your proposal to meet that need. And the idea here is to lead you towards developing a process, or that thing that Sheila mentioned about what you could take to a grant officer to begin having a conversation. So let's say you have an idea, but you don't know which program it fits in. It's really just so much easier to begin a conversation around something that exists on paper to give that sense of formulation. So the link that I'm telling you about, I dropped it into the chat, but I can do this again. It's just a link to slides. And actually, I could also just share it here quickly. Oops.
Yeah, do you want?
I can, I can switch. Again, it's a really big file. I'm sorry, that's what happens when you do PDFs. But I will.
I received a question about getting projects related to quantitative methods in the social sciences. It's a little bit outside of the purview of this webinar, but I would encourage you to check out Academic Works, which is run by the libraries, because there is a wealth of information, course material, books that are across all different topics. So if you Google Academic Works, it'll come up for that.
I'm gonna go, I'm flipping backwards. So this is basically a copy of the slide deck that I just handed to you. Sorry to go so fast. I don't want to give anybody whiplash here. But basically we've got sort of, it'll walk you through step by step how we guide people towards writing different kinds of grant proposals. We like to think about the labor involved in grant development. And then we ask you to think about what it takes to make an effective plan, how to design them around people. And then we walk you through step by step different activities that you could do. And you could even, gather together a group of faculty at your campus to walk through some of these materials together, if you'd like, to be able to run your own local faculty grant development workshop. and just sort of think about your answers to these questions. The other thing that I would strongly recommend, and I know that Sheila gestured to it, but it's sometimes something that we overlook, is that on the NEH website, and I've got a link in the last slide from today, is a list of all of of many previously successful grants and their narratives, so that you can see how other people have framed their approach. Things like giving a case study for why your project is valuable. You can see how that plays out in various kinds of grant applications. You know, what does it look like to try to make your grant sound very specific? How do people scope their awards? That's something that you can learn from looking at various proposals. And one of the really valuable things, and I'm just so delighted that Sheila featured CUNY faculty and staff projects that have received funding, is that so many of us who have received funding are very eager to talk about the proposal process, and very excited to talk to you about what we learned, about how we might structure it differently, about how we might go about doing it again. And sometimes they're even willing to share with you the feedback from awards. So when you apply for an NEH or many other kinds of awards, the reviewers will write feedback that then you have the opportunity, if you are unsuccessful or successful, but unsuccessful, to ask your program officer to forward you those comments. And many projects are not successful the first time you write them. And that's just the nature of it. Sheila was talking about how low the acceptance rate is. And it can be really frustrating because we all know that time is so precious and it's just so time, intensive to write something like this. But that rejection can also really feed into later success, because you'll get targeted, thoughtful feedback about what went wrong, and you will have the opportunity to rewrite and revise, and it will not be the same heavy lift the second time you try to apply. So writing the application the first time is always the biggest hurdle.
Yeah, for sure. I can affirm that. And also, having been on the other side, I've been in your position as well, as an applicant, multiple rejected applicant, as well as multiple recipients. So I totally understand. And in fact, I just put in the chat on a blog post that I recently wrote about sort of what to do when your project isn't funded, as a way of just saying, like, this is something that an overwhelming majority of applicants go through, and here's some things that you can take to sort of move forward and determine, help you to request that feedback, to schedule a consultation with a program officer to go through that feedback, because sometimes there's stuff that's just, like what's important in what you've seen, ways of improving an application, and again, assessing, is that something you really do want to take on? Or are you ready to move on, or you're doing something else, or you're ready to really dig in? So hopefully that is some useful advice that applies not just for the NEH, but for many different funding opportunities.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa and Sheila. Please, everyone join me in thanking Lisa and Sheila for doing this. We said a number of times, this will all be available on the Office of Research website. And hopefully we can continue this conversation. We got a lot of good ideas for our next website or our next webinar around this topic. So thanks to all of you for coming, and we'll see you next month. And happy grant writing. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.